Burn my shadow. Burn my shadow away.
People have always had idols. Some sentient, some not. With the rise of the internet, popularity has become much more commonplace, with idols springing out from everything from cover artists on Bandcamp or making Minecraft videos to making art or just being a character online. However, way too often have we seen these idols misuse their stardom and through it either hurt the people within their community or put them in legitimate danger. It is to the point where there are jokes and memes in circulation of the tragic trend that is influencers becoming popular only to see everything they built crumble down around them because they put people within their community in danger. It would seem far too many of these idols are unaware of the power they have, or they actively misuse it. Today, we are talking about a creator who created what was supposed to be a safe space for people to deal with their identity and trauma, only to be put in danger by the dangerous people within that community. Today, we're talking about Kittycorn and Sparklecare Hospital. Before we begin, it's important for me to establish a few things. The most important thing for me when making this documentary is to document events that have occurred from the outside looking in. That means, just like when I covered Floriverse, I have no interest in contacting anyone. I do not wish to personally involve myself with these things in any capacity. I am simply documenting the chats I have read and the screenshots I have seen. Therefore, I also gotta stress that due to this only being a retelling from the outside looking in, I cannot claim with 100% certainty that everything you're about to hear is the truth. I therefore ask that you do not use my word as the sole source for when you make your opinion on anyone involved. It is also extremely important for me that you do not in any shape or form inconvenience the people involved. I do not condone that in any way. I also want to make sure that you are comfortable with this video, so I will be putting a content warning on screen now so you can see what topics will be discussed. If you are not comfortable with these in any capacity, please do not watch the video. Things are going to be disturbing, and if you don't feel you can handle that, there is no reason you should force yourself to sit through it. And lastly, during my investigation for this documentary, it has come to my attention that people within the discussed community have a tendency to want to try and delete information. Therefore, the script, along with all the screenshots and other evidence, will be in a Dropbox link in the description. You're also more than welcome to download the video should you so desire. Thank you for your time, and I hope you will enjoy the video. Sparklecare is a webcomic created by writer and artist Kittycorn, who also sometimes uses the alias Neeby. Sparklecare takes place in a hospital of the same name and has seemingly been made for Kittycorn to deal with their medical related trauma. The original comic ran from 2016 to 2017 and was later rebooted into the comic you will find now, and has spanned from 2017 to present day, although its current status is, as of writing this, unknown. The comic has spawned multiple other spin-offs, shortened down to AUs as alternative universes, with stuff like Comet Care, Secret Canon, and Darker Matters. Prior to the Sparklecare Hospital comic, Kittycorn had worked on the comic Team Escapees and Ask Sonic the Cat. The Sparklecare Hospital comic was created by Kittycorn back in 2016 and was seemingly based on their own bad real experiences with the American health system. The comic was thus originally intended as a way for Kittycorn to cope with the experience they allegedly had. The characters are meant to be bad. The comic is about a traumatic experience in a hospital full of people who treat you like an experiment, surrounded by bad, obnoxious people who do bad things. If you really think I condone anything my characters do, you're wrong. I'm not addressing this anymore because saying blank is bad, like, yes, I know, that's the point. It's making fun of the people who do awful things, and yes, I understand that humor isn't for everyone, and you don't have to read it if it doesn't help you. Like, there are a lot of people who legitimately think I support necrophilia because I have a rainbow tiger with a dead husband, or that it's some sort of fetish comic, but it isn't. My comic is a coping mechanism based upon my experiences of almost dying in a hospital in February. You can dislike it all you want and let me know if I make a joke that draws the line. Please do that, I want to get better. But really? I don't know why you're yelling on the internet about a 16-year-old's rainbow furry comic on Christmas Eve. Thanks again for reading. Kittycorn would be very upfront about the origin of the comic and give a detailed retelling of what exactly spurred them to make the comic.
Lots of feelings. Long post, trigger warning, suicide mention. I've been having weird sensory meltdowns all day and couldn't figure out why I kept getting panicked and stressed. But it turns out, my body remembered something that my brain did not. After the third sensory overload of the day, I was rushing to vent out my feelings in a diary app that I write my feelings in. Then I looked at the date. I realized what day it was. It has been exactly 2 years since I almost died. 1 year ago, on the first anniversary of the happening, my body had a similar reaction. It was several sudden episodes of mania followed by intense panic and immeasurable stress over the course of the day. I would go from feeling really good and productive and suddenly plummet into impulsive chaos where my head would pound and everything around me freaked me out. Every sound and every movement made me feel violent and want to lash out. These things I felt today and last year were also the same things I felt on that day. Compulsions that made me want to hurt others and myself. I attempted suicide that day. I think lots of people occasionally have passing thoughts that are suicidal in nature when under intense stress. People who are depressed even more so. Some even have them every single day of their lives. That's where I was, where even the smallest mistake or failure drove me to the edge. I became suicidal at the drop of a pin. Every time something bad happened, my brain pushed the big red button and sent my body into DEFCON 2. Every single time. Of course, not every time I got like this did I attempt. I sometimes came dangerously close, but never close enough. It's hard even now for me to understand exactly what it was that caused me to peak on that day. My memory of that night is fuzzy due to slipping in and out of consciousness several times. But something I do remember before the attempt happened was something extremely significant. I was drawing with rainbows that day. Eye-bleeding colors. That was the first day I drew rainbows. I drew some pretty dark things. Here's some of them. I cannot differentiate what is real and what is not. I'm sick of thinking that things will be okay. Looks kinda familiar, doesn't it? These drawings I made hours before trying to kill myself became the very foundation for what would eventually evolve into Sparklecare. Bright colors with horribly depressing, nihilistic, hopeless messages that sort of turned into my brand. I was hospitalized for my attempt for about a month or so, and while in the hospital, I drew lots of depressing, colorful things in Crayola markers. But here's where I know you probably were waiting for this story to get to. What exactly happened to me in that hospital? For legal reasons, I still am not going to go into major detail about my experiences inside those walls. But to put it simply, the psychiatric ward I was placed in was very bad. Me and all the other patients there were heavily neglected and dehumanized by the staff. To sum it up, the experiences I had there were more traumatic than the suicide attempt itself. As horrible as the hospital experience was, I was put on medication for a disability I have, one that didn't work, which was the first step towards recovery. As months passed, my psychiatrist fiddled with different medications until I somehow ended up on something that actually started working. Not only did it help symptoms of my disability, but it also helped with the major depression I was experiencing and balanced my chemicals enough that I got a sudden boost in creativity and my ability to be productive. Suddenly, I could actually do things. That's when I started Sparklecare. What actually led to its official fabrication is actually pretty interesting. I've had lots of different comic series and characters in the past, but lots of them were created and existed through some very hard times in my life, and they bore lots of negative memories and associations. I tried my hardest to look past them, but it proved useless as it eventually became too much. I had a breakdown over these bad associations and basically gave up on everything I was working on at the time. And that's when something happened. I don't know how it happened. Part of me speculates it had to do with the fact I was put on new medication about 2 days prior, and that the chemicals kicked in at the perfect moment. And so I did. I didn't even try to think of a story, I just decided to make a character. I went on Twitter and asked some longtime close friends, people who are all now in the ZCP, for an animal species. They gave lots of suggestions, but I ended up combining one with my own, and I drew Doom. I literally didn't even draw him more than once, I just drew him one single time and started a story. I made a few more characters, then started the comic. I didn't have anything planned or even scripted, it was just something dumb I made with the idea of making fun of doctors who were bad to me in the hospital. I wanted to make something to make myself feel better. I didn't think anything would come of it. I sort of half expected that I would give up after a few days, but I kept it going. It was very small at first, but I remember being extremely happy and excited when I got fan art for the first time from someone who wasn't friends with me. It was the best feeling ever, and I had no idea back then. No idea that this little creation I made when trying to not kill myself would actually get any recognition or attention, let alone help someone else. I think in about October of 2016 was when it blew up for the first time. It got so much fan art and people made fan characters and more people followed me. I received messages from people who told me that they related to my story and characters and that it gave them hope to live. I remember crying on Christmas of that year because someone sent me an ask telling me they were spending Christmas in the hospital but were happy because they kept seeing doctors and thinking about my characters. The fact that I could help a single person alone, that I could help multiple people, that was the most surreal thing. I had just turned 16 that Christmas and people were telling me I was helping them get through being suicidal. From then on I decided to start to make things that I would have wanted to see when I was in that place. Things that I needed but didn't have when I was in that dark place. Things that I wanted to see exist. Things that 9-year-old me would have been obsessed with. Stuff that was unnecessarily violent and obscene and colorful and ridiculous and silly because it made me happy. It made others happy. I realized that by helping myself, I learned how to help others too. I'm happy I'm alive, and if I can make just one other person feel that way too, I'll die happy.
Contrasting this horrible experience, Kittycorn would go on to make a comic with cutesy and colorful art, with humor fitting the early 2000s. This seems to have been for the reason of taking something bad and putting a positive spin on it.
Sparklecare is an edgy webcomic about a ridiculously bright, gory, nihilistic rainbow hospital. It is meant to be nostalgic and reminiscent of early internet teenage culture of the 2000s. The comic takes place in 2006. Hence the GeoCities-like layout, the characters are meant to resemble Sparkle Dogs and Mary Sue OCs, all things edgy. I mean, it couldn't possibly have any deep psychological message or story beneath all those rainbows, right? Bro, this comic so far has got me in deep. I need to know everything I'm invested, send help. But yeah, this comic is funny and weird and gross and wonderful in general so far, and I love you so much. What the fuck? This is my aesthetic right here, and aside from that, I've had a few awful experiences with hospitals, and this comic helped me to laugh away a little bit of my fear. Just, I don't know, thank you for being so cool, and I can't wait for more updates. Heart. Hey man, if it means anything, I've had a pretty awful experience in a hospital myself. The theme is meant to kind of brighten how awful they can be, humorize it, while still showing the terrors of being there, all exaggerated. I'm so glad my silly little comic can be a special place in your heart like it is in mine.
For those in the know of the comic, it is parted up into two separate eras, the pre-boot and the reboot. As mentioned before, the pre-boot era spanned from 2016 to 2017, and the reboot has spanned from 2017 to, as of writing this, current date. It would however seem that with everything going down, it has put the comic on an indefinite hiatus. The reason for the reboot of the comic, according to Kittycorn, was because the comic was portraying LGBTQ+ people in a negative light, as well as them realizing a large part of their audience were minors, and thus wished to make the content fitting for this younger demographic.
Announcement. It has been over a year since I started this webcomic. When I first made it, it was because I wanted to create something new without any bad associations. I didn't think about it much. I certainly didn't actually expect it to become popular and reach so many people. It was a happy accident. This thing I created for myself to help me feel better suddenly was helping others feel better too. The positive response I have received for this comic is overwhelming. The messages people have sent me sharing their stories about how my comic has helped them moves me in ways I didn't think were possible. I didn't think I was capable of doing this, of getting to this point I'm at right now. I didn't think I would actually be alive at this point in time at all. I know I briefly shared that I had a horrible hospital experience that I almost didn't survive, literally. But surviving has brought me here. If I didn't go through that awful thing and live to tell a tale, I wouldn't have made this comic and reached so many people. There really isn't anything in the world I'd give this up for, and not just because it helps me, but because I know it helps others. I know I started this as a coping mechanism, but it has evolved and flourished into something more complex than that. This comic isn't just for me anymore, it's for the world. I want to be capable of healing others as I have healed myself. And really, doing this for others does help me. It's what motivates me to keep going. I happen to have made this comic for a reason, even if it's just giving people a reason to look forward to Monday instead of dreading it because of the rerun to work or school or the fear of the problems in their world that make them not want to go on anymore. I've been in all of those places. I know that horrible, awful feeling. Even if I'm not capable of healing the whole world, anyone is enough for me. Any people I can reach, even if it's just one or two people. I know you're all probably wondering why I'm talking about all of this. It's because I realized something. I realized a lot of things in the past 15 months. For one, I realized just how powerful art can be and how many people it can help, how many lives it can save. I have also realized how many people it can hurt. I'm sure everyone is at least somewhat aware that the characters in my webcomic are actually quite negative, and if you aren't or haven't thought about it, this is about representation. My comic is, as you already know, full of LGBT characters. At the same time, those same characters aren't good people. The message I'm trying to send is being distorted by my bias to want to create LGBT characters as a lesbian with a dev crew that does not contain a single cishet person. My reasoning isn't because this many gay people in one place isn't realistic, but rather this many bad gay people isn't realistic. Trust me, I'm aware representation is extremely important, and I do not want to make a series with an all LGBT cast, but this series just is not the right place for it. The message my comic is meant to send about the flaws in the medical system via over-exaggeration and irony, it is meant to showcase the idiocy and arrogance of health professionals who ignore the reality of problems and think that everything has a simple solution, throwing drugs at patients and sending them into a spiral of dependency and darkness. I've had multiple people in my life harmed by these sorts of treatments. That is what my comic is about. is not meant to be representative of good people and their identities. When I first made my comic in a spur of the moment attempt to crawl out of a depressive episode, I didn't realize just how much I could affect others. When I turn on the TV in our current time, I don't want to see a lesbian character who's an evil serial killer. I wish we lived in a world where it didn't matter, where being a lesbian was just as normal as being tall or short, where the way the world viewed me wasn't already so negative. But the reality is, we don't. We can't afford to be portrayed as violent, harmful, evil people in a world that already dehumanized me as much as it has, and I don't want to contribute to that. I don't want to become part of the problem. Fiction does affect reality. If I'm able to make this many people happy and have hope, I'm just as capable of hurting them and many others. And there are some people I have already hurt, and to be truthful, one of those people is myself. I know this sounds a lot like I'm gonna cancel my comic. I'm not. But I'm going to do something. I'm going to start over. I'm going to reboot it. I realize that I am definitely going to get backlash for my decision. I might lose some readers. I might lose a lot of readers. I know people are definitely going to be upset with me. But I realize that no matter what I do, someone somewhere isn't going to like it. I'm not doing this because anyone is pressuring me or because I want anyone to like me or change their minds about who I am as a creator and an individual. I'm doing this because in my heart I feel it's the right thing. I want to do what's right, not just for me, but for the sake of the world and everyone like me. This is my decision. I want my story to be told and help people heal in the best way possible and rid it of any negativity that may hinder that process. And I'm not making everyone straight. I'm just not making the bad characters LGBT. This actually isn't the sole reason I'm rebooting, albeit being a major one. Another reason I'm doing this is because when I started Sparklecare, I made it in a spur of the moment and it gave me no time to really develop it and flesh it out. Sure, I did loads of that in the last 15 months, but I didn't have an ending or real plot in mind when I started it, and it made the beginning and a majority of the first chapter very clustered and hard to follow. Another reason I'm doing this is because some of the characters in the comic were not made by me, and I ran into some legal ownership trouble with the creators of said characters. If you were wondering why I don't really put OCs in my comic, this is why. It's dangerous, especially if you plan on going on to publish and profit off of your comic series. Some characters will not be returning in the reboot because of these reasons. I learned a lot about comic making and things I want to do better, and this time around I want to get it right. I want the comic to be the best I'm capable of, the best my whole crew is capable of. I'm going to have it published in a final book, and I want that book to be consistent in quality all the way through. I know I'm capable of that. I've come to realize my strengths. I'm going to do this. Thank you so much to every single person who has read my comic and supported me. Thank you, even if you decide to stop reading because of this decision. I understand and I wish you the best. There are thousands of other very talented, hardworking LGBT creators out there who are waiting for your views, with better representation than I've given so far. Please support your favorite independent artist. This is our lives and we all need you. And to those who are patient enough to stick around while I make my way back to square one, thank you so much for holding it out for me while I work my hardest to make this comic the best thing I'm capable of. This marks the start of another hiatus while I go back to the drawing board and prepare to start back at the beginning. I'm not sure of the length this hiatus will be, but I won't make you guys wait forever. I will be uploading art and progress of development to my social media accounts and my Patreon too. Once I have a clearer time frame in mind, I will definitely let everyone know when the comic will return. Remember, this isn't goodbye, we'll be back. Trip.
As the project went on, Kittycorn would eventually recruit friends and fans of the project, whom they had met online, to help work on the comic. These helpers would do everything from taking on parts of the illustrative process of the comic's creation, to coming up with characters to feature within the comic. This crew would come to use names such as the Sparkle Crew or the Sparkle Carrying Family, but would most commonly come to be known as the ZCP, the Zany Clown Posse, a spoof of the band, the Insane Clown Posse.
What does ZCP actually stand for? Zany Clown Posse. It's a reference to the Insane Clown Posse band because we call our crew members clowns, JXJFHFNF. I choose the reference name because I was listening to a song by them when I was designing Doom for the first time during the pre-boot. I don't know if I ever actually explained this before. New info if I haven't, lol. And I guess that meant the band sort of had a weird small influence on the existence of this series. It's not really meant to be serious, it's just kind of a silly name I chose as a joke and it stuck. An alternate name for the ZCP that was the original name before we chose that was the Sparklecare family, SCF. That name isn't really used anymore, but it still is a part of our history, so it's sentimental. That name is actually mentioned at the footer of all the pages if you haven't noticed.
Everything seemed to be going well for Sparklecare Hospital, and as an extension, Kittycorn, with them being heralded for not just their positive messages, but also their mature response to criticism and feedback. They would even go as far as implement accessibility features, making it easier for everyone, no matter what, to read the comic. And while Kittycorn was not actively opposed to adult fan art being drawn from their comic, they would request it was being kept away from children and that the fan art remained tasteful and unproblematic.
Are the doctors adults? If so, are you okay with NSFW Rule 34 art? If it is kept out of tags, just kept as a private image to a blog that will not show up in an index when the comic is searched? It's the internet, so sure, yeah, they're adults. Please don't put it in the main tag because a lot of readers are minors. Tag it as Sparklecin. Frequently asked questions about the comic. Is this a kidcore comic? No! A lot of people believe because of the comic's aesthetic and the fact I run a Tumblr blog that contains it, that it is kidcore, but it is not kid-friendly at all due to gore and NSFW themes. I actually really recommend that if you draw fan art of it and put it in one of those tags, please put a warning of the comic not being kid-friendly. I really don't want anyone to be upset or have their safe spaces invaded. I want everyone to feel okay. Is this comic 18 plus? Technically no. There's no explicit pornography ever, but it will have adult/NSFW themes. Please keep this in mind while reading, if that stuff bothers you.
However, slowly but surely, cracks would start to appear. The Sparklecare Hospital website would initially start out as a way to explain what the comic was and what it stood for, being a comic that was a commentary on the American healthcare system and to shine a light on the problems of the system as experienced by someone who had to go through the system themselves. It would also credit the ZCP as part of the production of the comic.
Sparklecare is a webcomic and commentary on the reality of healthcare in America. It is based on my own experience in a psychiatric hospital and highlights the horrors and trauma that come with hospitalization for any reason. This comic is not meant to dehumanize the medical system, but to shed light on things that aren't commonly talked about. Bad healthcare isn't all it's about either. It's also tangentially about abuse, trauma, capitalism, corporate corruption, and modern American politics. It centers around a primarily LGBT cast. Despite the bright colors, rainbows, and cartoon animals, Sparklecare is not a kid's story and tackles a lot of heavy subjects. Due to the comic's nature, Sparklecare is intended to be read with a trigger-sensitive comic reader that can inform readers in advance if there's potentially upsetting content, ranging from violence to abuse to suicide or sexual humor. It also comes with incorporated transcripts that can explain what's going on to a reader even if they can't view the page for any reason. There are normal transcripts and clean transcripts, the latter being for sensitive material with in-character dialogue. More information about how this works can be seen on the comic reader module as you read. This is to protect readers from unintentionally triggering themselves while reading the comic. The comic follows a story of Barry Ill, a green cat who is an autistic and schizophrenic trans man, and his experience of being admitted to the Sparklecare Hospital. Despite its glamorous reputation, the hospital is actually a prison that tortures and kills its patients and drains their families of insurance by the corrupt hospital owner, Dr. Cuddles. Cuddles is a greedy capitalist scumbag who cares about nothing but money, and so far, everything is working out for him. Any patients who escape or try to speak out against the hospital aren't believed and are written off as crazy. The story follows Barry's journey into uncovering the truth about why this place really is the way it is, and why nobody is talking about it. Barry is joined by a unicorn named Unicornilius, an autistic gay man who has been trapped in the hospital for almost a decade. Uni is well known for his swaggy personality, and despite being extremely depressed, is a beacon of light and humor in the grim surroundings of the hospital. He is also accompanied by Carolyn Coffs, a devious thief and escape artist, the safety-obsessed botanist Hermea Philly, and the incredibly gifted and lucky Jay Fortune. Barry and his friends work together on a plot to one day finally escape this horrible place and tell the outside world what is really going on. But things aren't as easy and hopeful as one would want to believe. They are surrounded by cruel, unloving doctors who want nothing but to make them suffer and keep them tied down. Something deeper seems to boil beneath the surface, but nobody's entirely sure what it is. Surely there's someone out there trying to save them. Right? My name is Trip. Sparklecare is a dark comedy webcomic about medical malpractice and trauma. It's my first major project. A fair warning to all readers that the comic will contain lots of disturbing content. This is not my first attempt on this story, but I'm rebooting the original. I hope you all enjoy the story I have to tell. Thanks for reading. Sparklecare is brought to you lovingly by the Sparkle Crew, also known as SCF or the Zany Clown Posse, making very bad creative decisions since 2016. Love, the ZCP.
Years later, in 2023, Kittycorn would unveil an AU of the comic, known as Cometcare, which worked in the form of an Ask blog. The premise of this comic was an alternate universe in which the characters from the Sparklecare Hospital comic managed to escape the hospital and formed a family and lots of children. This particular AU would end up becoming a catalyst for a lot of stuff going on later, so keep it in the back of your mind for now.
Hello, I've never made one of these before, but I wanted to try it out. My name is Athlai. You can ask me things, I guess.
It should be stated that throughout the production of the Sparklecare Hospital comic, several changes were made to the aforementioned description of that comic, changing what Kittycorn would describe the purpose of the comic to be. It would go from being a satire about the American healthcare system to being a comic meant to cope with the trauma of their experiences. But it was also around this time that the aforementioned cracks would start to show. Where before Kittycorn would handle criticism and feedback of their comic with grace, they would now be very defensive of their work, and would lash out at people criticizing it or them. An example of this could be when people were showing their discomfort that the character Doom, who was allegedly torturing and emotionally abusing the patients of the hospital, was now in a relationship with nothing short of free of his prior patients and had been interested even when they were actively his patients. Despite having actively removed the section about this being based on Kittycorn's real experiences as a coping mechanism from the About section of the comic, Kittycorn would actively attack and mock people who had an issue with this, trivializing it all to being a comic about cartoon animal people, and it should thus not be taken seriously.
Just discovered your comic recently and saw the Cometcare tag. Stockholm Syndrome isn't cute. These are my comfort OCs from my comfort comic. I made this for myself. I think I have a right to be comforted by my own OCs however I want. This story is literally based on my traumatic experience, and the actions of the staff are also based on that, but I still can't decide how I want them to be viewed. Don't tell me how to treat my own OCs. I don't care if you don't like Cometcare. Some people don't like it, and that's totally fine. I know some people are uncomfortable with it for their own personal reasons, but they're usually respectful about expressing this, and I always tag every single mention of it for people who blacklist it. I don't mind people having personal boundaries and comforts, but don't tell me it's bad or call it Stockholm Syndrome. If they were your OCs, you'd feel the same way. Despite the fact this is a webcomic, they're still my OCs, and I can feel how I want about them. They are not from a studio-created media. They are characters I first assigned in Paint Tool SAI when I was 15 years old. They are OCs. And if you actually read the comic or knew anything about Doom as a character or his story, you would understand a little better that they are not an antagonist, even if antagonizing because of their job. You have no idea how his story is going to be handled, or if he is going to be redeemed, or how he will be redeemed, if at all. And lastly, my Comic-Care art posted here isn't even canon. I haven't even confirmed whether or not the ship actually happens. It very well may not happen for various reasons. It's just comfort art because I like the ship and it makes me happy. It's not that deep.
Perhaps as a response to this criticism, the fact that the comic was based on Kittycorn's real-life experience was re-included in the About section, and would now also include that the story was created to vent and heal from their trauma, with the social commentary of the comic now being a secondary part of the comic. Kittycorn would also double down on this, editing their Tumblr blogs to now feature prominently that this was purely an OC comfort comic.
Polary Doomy Fan Blog. Official blog for the webcomic Sparklecare, a comfort OC comic created with the purpose of healing from trauma. Sparklecare is about the story of an evil rainbow murder hospital that tortures and kills people, and its victims who are trying to escape and expose its true nature to the unaware outside world. Read the comic at sparklecarehospital.com. Updates Mondays and Thursdays. Sparklecare is a trauma comfort comic made for the purpose of healing from trauma. Please be aware of this as you read. Everything in this story is very personal to me and my life experiences. It's made for comfort, nothing more, nothing less. Link to FAQ. Please read the FAQ before sending an ask. Warning: this comic contains gore, trauma, abuse, and other sensitive themes. Reader discretion is advised. Visit the site and read the About page to learn more about the trigger warnings and contents. 27th of August 23. Version 4 is here. Updates are Mondays and Thursdays. And most important, Baruni in love forever and always. Notice: if my ask box is closed, feel free to add me in questions in a post if you need to know something. I don't open it very often anymore for lots of reasons.
The comic had, in other words, gone from being a personal coping tool for Kittycorn to a comic everyone could enjoy, and now back to being a coping tool for Kittycorn and somehow also an OC comfort comic. The comic would also flip-flop in what degree it would dissuade minors from reading the comic. When Sparklecare Hospital was rebooted, it contained a not safe for work warning, telling people that minors should by no means read the comic due to the nature of the comic's contents.
Link to FAQ. Official Tumblr of the webcomic Sparklecare. Read the comic at sparklecarehospital.com. Parentheses NSFW.
However, in September of the same year, the not safe for work warning was removed completely.
Warning: the following comic contains adult language, violence and gore, medical malpractice, torture and abuse, trauma, and sexual humor. Later scenes may involve suicide and other triggering or squiggy subject matter. This is not for kids and should not be read by any. Viewer discretion is advised.
It later returned, with the site updating in November, now saying that the comic contained adult content.
Warning: the following comic contains adult language, violence and gore, medical malpractice, torture and abuse, trauma, and sexual humor. Later scenes may involve suicide and other triggering or squeaky subject matter. Viewer discretion is advised. For more information on how triggering content is filtered, review the Comic Viewer tab while reading. This is not for kids and should not be read by any. Recommended age is 16 and older.
Kittycorn would stress how they were uncomfortable that people under the age of 16 were interacting with their comic, but then the very next day say that certain posts could be interacted with by anyone, even those under the age of 16.
If you're under 16, please be aware I'm not comfortable with you interacting with my blog. I was just sent another NSFW by a minor and didn't realize, and I'm extremely uncomfortable because I'm almost 18. Please don't do that. You are allowed to be a fan, I can't stop you, but do not ever send me anything NSFW, ever. So, specifically, what are people under the age of 16 allowed and not allowed to do in relation to the comic and this blog? Just asking so I don't accidentally do something you're uncomfortable with. It says in my blog description, you can comment on post if it says anyone can reply/interact. Thanks for being so kind and understanding.
Somewhere between 2019 and 2020, the header of Sparklecare's Tumblr page removed that the comic was not safe for work, and instead the warning referred readers to view the content warning on the site instead, and in 2021, the warning was removed altogether from the header and was instead relegated to a pinned post.
Link to FAQ. Official Tumblr of the webcomic Sparklecare, a tale of medical malpractice, rainbows, and the ridicule and overthrowing of corporate power. Read the comic at sparklecarehospital.com. Warning: this comic contains gore, trauma, abuse, and other sensitive themes. Reader discretion is advised. Visit the site to learn more about the trigger warnings and contents. Official Tumblr of the webcomic Sparklecare, the story of an evil rainbow murder hospital and the misadventures of its unfortunate victims and their desperate attempts to break free from its bloody hands and tell the world the truth. Read the comic at sparklecarehospital.com. Link to FAQ. Please read the FAQ before sending an ask. Warning: the comic contains gore, trauma, abuse, and other sensitive themes. Reader discretion is advised. Visit the site to learn more about trigger warnings and contents. Notice: 4th of October 2021. Volume 2 is over. Thanks for reading, everyone. The comic is back on temporary hiatus until Volume 3. We will have a release date soon. Just keep an eye out for updates.
Around this time, Kittycorn would also experiment with multiple different alternative universe comics, but most of these projects didn't really amount to much or even see the light of day. One of the projects that was created, however, was called Night Stars.
Night Stars is officially coming October 28th. A slightly less suckish world. Some things still kinda suck though, inevitably.
The comic existed only for a very short time, and no real reason for why it was halted was ever given publicly. However, behind the scenes, members of the ZCP would explain why the comic was scrapped. Apparently, the other members of the ZCP were having a lot of fun with the comic, using it to have their own characters exist and have small storylines of their own. But when Kittycorn's characters were not given as much attention as Kittycorn supposedly wanted, they cancelled the project and removed all the characters made by the ZCP from the project, replacing them with their own.
I'm not sure. A bunch of the clowns made characters and then were playing toys with them, and it made Kitty sad that she didn't have any control over her story anymore, so she stopped acknowledging it, and then when it got abandoned, she deleted the channel. With Night Stars, her whole thing was she did it to reconnect with Baruni, but felt threatened by the attention the clowns were giving their own OCs. She saw it as them caring more about their OCs than the story, and Baruni when it was really just people being passionate about their contributions. She can be upset when it's not about her, but Chaos cannot be upset when it's not about them. Fascinating. Regarding Chaos's feeling neglected if they didn't talk about her animals, and how she felt about it.
On November the 19th, 2024, the About section of the comic was completely reworked, now completely void of anything related to social commentary, and it is instead solely about Kittycorn's trauma coping and comfort, and all mentions and credit to the ZCP have been actively removed. This now seemed more like it was exclusively Kittycorn's comic and the ZCP were just helping them making it, uncredited.
About the comic. Sparklecare is a 3-part webcomic focusing on an evil hospital known as the Sparklecare Hospital. It follows the story of a cat named Barry Ill, who is tricked by the fact they broadcast himself as the best healthcare in the world, and he ends up trapped there, a victim to its horrors despite the warnings of a strange old man. He is accompanied by Cornelius, his roommate and their friends Caroline Cuffs, Hermia Philly, and Jay Fortune, in a story where they try to escape and tell the outside world the truth. It is based on the author Kittycorn S. Comet's traumatic experience in a hospital and is meant to be a comfort coping OC story to help heal from said trauma. The comic is not meant to be interpreted as anything more than a work of trauma, coping, and comfort. It is a part of her healing journey and tackles the subjects and trauma and abuse in metaphors and symbolism. Sparklecare is currently in its first series, which is the first part or act of the story. Nearing a decade in its existence, the comic will continue until the whole story is told, no matter how long it may take. Sparklecare is brought to you lovingly by Nibi, an artist named Kittycorn S. Comet. Nibi.
All these changes would not go unnoticed by the ZCP, and one of the members of the ZCP, Ozzy, would make a post pointing out that the inconsistency in who the comic was for, what it was supposed to be, and who were allowed to read it, largely came as a result of Kittycorn's whim, based on them wanting to victimize themselves in the face of criticism.
Just learned about a certain recent development regarding this. I'm not active in the fandom, by the way, I just saw a post about this on my homepage. In this post I'm reblogging, I said that I wanted this creator to step away from the internet and get better, but doubted that they will. I'm still disappointed to see that I was right. They've shown what their choice is, and it's not for bettering themselves. This respect of the audience continues, and this creator has shown that they really truly do not care. Even in the face of their audience and some former members of the team feeling hurt, betrayed and traumatized, their initial response to this situation showed their true colors. But even after having all this time to calm down, rationalize and self-reflect, they didn't. Instead, they decided to double down with no shame at all. Nothing but self-pity and victimizing themselves over a situation of their own making. Referring to the main comic here, why make this personal story public in the first place? They told me once it was so people who would enjoy and connect with the story and characters can find it, which is a valid reason to share a personal OC story online in my opinion. But they've shown that they don't actually care about the people they said they made the story public for. These very people are the ones who've been hurt by all of this. The very little sympathy I had for this person has shrunk even more. If they were to ever choose to better themselves at any point after this, it'd have taken way too long. This might be the last post I make about this whole thing. I intended the post I'm reblogging from to be the last, and only to be edited when I remember anything else I want to say, but I wanted to make an addendum considering one of the last things I said in that post. My doubt that they'd better themselves had been confirmed, and I'm pissed about that. Handling criticism poorly and not wanting to be part of or even hear about any serious discussions were signs to me that they'd refuse to choose a path of self-improvement.
The ZCP would come to be known as the band to Kittycorn's lead act, meaning while they all worked together to create the comic, Kittycorn was the leader and had the final say. The ZCP would supposedly mainly consist of followers and fans of the series that Kittycorn would personally recruit onto the team. While this should have been a fun experience of a bunch of friends and like-minded individuals coming together to create a project they were deeply passionate about, multiple former ZCP members have reflected back on their time working with Kittycorn as being an incredibly volatile and stressful environment. This was in large part due to how Kittycorn handled criticism and disagreements. While Kittycorn had initially portrayed themselves as being calm and level-headed and even appreciative of feedback publicly, behind the scenes they were allegedly everything but that. The ZCP has made multiple testimonies about these working conditions.
I don't personally recall any specific instances where someone was flamed for offering design criticism. However, I know that basically everyone was afraid to offer criticism in general because KC took it personally, and anyone who is receiving the criticism would often take it personally because that's the kind of environment that was encouraged. I think it's kind of fucked up that, because they literally presented it as an idea to gauge what everyone else thought, to ignored messages. And yet got mad when someone said, I'm opposed to this. As you can tell, there was a lot of drama, a lot of infighting, and a lot of petty arguments. Something new happened every day, and the crew felt really unstable most of the time. The environment was, hellish, to say the least. It was extremely unhealthy and was one big echo chamber. Nobody knew if it was meant to be a more professional group or just a friend circle, and some of the clowns never spoke to anyone else. They were just there because they were dating Kittycorn. Everyone was expected to praise everything Kittycorn did. We had to have a side server to have serious discussions about crew matters without Kittycorn in it, so we could actually talk about serious fandom matters. And there was of course the favoritism. Kittycorn's favorites were her partners, like Lola and Emsady, and anyone else was shafted quite a lot. People like me and Chaos were sometimes ignored or treated worse because she didn't like us. Anytime someone had a criticism of the comic, they had to be extremely delicate if it was brought up at all, because Kittycorn was so extremely sensitive to any sort of critique, despite claiming to be open to constructive criticism. She was so heavily triggered by things like, quote, drama, aka important events with dangerous people in the fandom like Chimera, that we weren't able to bring them up in the clown server at all, and if we did, Kittycorn's girlfriend Lola would immediately shut us down.
The mood of the ZCP was apparently so anti-criticism that multiple members would actively neglect criticizing anything because they didn't feel anyone would have their back, or that they were just going to be immediately shut down.
There were several times where I wanted to suggest showing characters disabilities or afflictions affecting them more, like show Jay scratching them from being itchy all the time, or show characters who have canes use them. Sometimes I forget Polly even uses a cane, because it's only ever really been featured in ref art. Maybe Polly's shown using a cane in Comic Care, but I don't remember. I'm mainly referring to the main comic anyway. These were things I remember wanting to bring up, but one day I saw stuff like that being talked about in a negative way, and I just knew my suggestions would be shut down. Oh shit, just bunch of stuff I wanted to bring up for so long but felt I couldn't cause I felt like hardly anyone would have my back on it. Not to paint as every ZCP member has bad people, I know that's not the case, but that's how it felt at the time. Yep, the ZCP led to me feeling as though I didn't really have anyone to look to. This isn't anyone's fault, no one needed to be my friend or anything, but a lot of the time any suggestions or concerns I had were shut down, and I eventually started to hold my tongue on things I grew to have issues with because of it.
While a large portion of the ZCP members would consist of adults, it would also have its share of minors who were part of the group. Kittycorn would recruit people like Chaos, who was only 14 years old at the time of their recruitment.
I joined in 2017 when I was 14, invited directly in DMs by KC to an entirely different now deleted server. I joined a few days after PJ/Suck. They separated newbies into some role called the Supple or Gaggle or some shit like that based on a really bad 3D animation. I've literally never found it again. The first thing I learned was Uni's real name, as at the time it was Uni publicly as a joke. Then I sat around for hours as someone told me the perfect Cheerio joke really slowly. Then I was drip-fed lore, I think, and also began working. I wasn't picked based on art style or ability. I was invited because they felt bad that my Sparklecare Discord server, the first one ever made, went up in flames.
However, despite being 14 years old, the tone of the ZCP was allegedly very sexual, and despite the server having both minors and adults, the adults never stepped in to try and stop the rampant sexual talk that was prominent in the server.
Casey, in her own way, is a victim of many things. There were lots of adults present when I was 14 and she was 16, and the environment was very sexual. I mean, an entire pre-boot arc was about Doom basically committing date rape, and the sex scene was going to actually be drawn. Not explicitly, but that was still something planned with a bunch of kids making it and the creator herself being a kid.
The group also had multiple trials. If someone did something the others didn't agree with, they would be pulled into a public display where the creators would then all group together and lambaste the person for their shortcomings publicly for everyone to see. Chaos, despite being somewhere around the age of 14 to 16 years old at the time, would for example allegedly be lambasted for accidentally disclosing a plot detail that wasn't public yet to their boyfriend, or for inking pages with a character they liked. Chaos would always opt to apologize, despite these trials consisting of people who were in their 20s berating a 14-year-old in a public trial.
Hey, Kylo? Yeah. Are you telling people not in the crew about stuff that hasn't been released yet? No, sorry, I mentioned Jay's name by accident to my boyfriend, I'm sorry. But how would he know about the luck thing if you didn't tell him? I'm sorry, I'm not trying to put you on the spot or anything. This is just important stuff, you know? I mentioned the whole name, including the fortune part of her name, and I guess he took it literally. I'm so sorry. Okay, please don't leak information, it's really unprofessional. Thank you for understanding.
In 2020, Kittycorn's girlfriend at the time produced a 13-page long document all to berate Chaos, multiple things of which being things Chaos had previously apologized for.
So I'm going to warn you up front, Nick. Everything contained within this document, I have a strong feeling you're not gonna like hearing a lot of this. Like, a lot of this. However, I still consider you my friend, so you deserve the entire truth of both what I've been doing and how I feel about this entire situation as a whole, just as much as anyone else does. However, I'm also gonna give you a preemptive warning despite me saying this later in the dark with my reason for it more explained. I'm gonna be leaving Ant's colony. On one hand, it's for your personal comfort, which I'm trying to still respect, and on the other hand, you'll see what I have to say later. It's a bit longer of an explanation than a sentence. So yeah, just be warned of these things as you read. Also, know that unless I mention a specific person's name, I made every single decision and came to every single conclusion I have on my own. So if you feel frustrated with me after, that's just on me. I didn't even tell Minnie about all this at first. So yeah.
Kittycorn also made an official Sparklecare fan Discord.
Sparklecaring fans. We now have an official Discord server. Come join Sparklecaring fans to meet other readers and talk and share art and make friends in the community. Join here.
This Discord was not age restricted, and children as young as 13 were allowed onto the server. Multiple mods of the server noted how this was an issue, as a lot of the conversation on the Discord were sexual in nature.
Like the fucking discussion in Sparkle AUs about the joke of uni fucking vacuum cleaner or whatever. That was vile to see. Not so much the joke itself, just seeing literal children talking about it. Yeah. I'm also not comfortable being 19 in a space where straight up 13-year-olds are a part of. Especially ones that try to talk to me.
Even Kittycorn was acting inappropriately around the Discord with many horny jokes and lore dumps about sexual topics.
Oh yeah, Kittycorn was talking about them in the fucking Sparklecaring fan server, which had a bunch of minors in it. What? The rope burn shit in the Discords with 13-year-olds? Yes, and I actually had to tell her to stop. Oh my god, that's disgusting. Kittycorn should have 100% known better.
If you are confused about the rope burns here, it will be explained later. After once again changing the not safe for work warning in 2023, this time to a more detailed one, Kittycorn would begin behave much more overtly sexual in their chats with the ZCP, which, again, included multiple minors.
Warning. The following comic contains adult language, violence and gore, medical malpractice, torture and abuse, heavy themes of trauma, and sexual humor. However, due to not being pornographic, this is not 18+. The comic's full plot will also contain and cover strong themes of suicide, basically every possible aspect of it as a subject, from suicidal ideation, attempts, baiting, the whole spectrum of the subject, and body horror. Here is the link to the Trigger Master List, an exhaustive list of every piece of triggering content in the comic so far. This can also be accessed via the comic viewer. This comic is not for kids. Despite not being 18+, it's recommended you be 16+ to read this comic. You aren't necessarily banned from doing so if you aren't, because this isn't X-rated and never will be, but please keep in mind what you're reading is incredibly sensitive and tackles dark subject matters, briefly listed above, that may be hard to understand if you're younger. Gay ass rat? Yeah, he's blushing because it turned him on. Does Polly sleep around a lot like Carrie or nah? Yes, dude, Polly is the biggest whore ever. I thought so. Worse than Carrie. Oh my god. Cute, I love. Oh, this is cute.
Former ZCP members would also testify that they had tried to make Kittycorn put the proper content warnings in the comic in regards to her character's explicit kinks, but Kittycorn was very much against this.
No, yeah, real. Kittycorn definitely took advantage of such a young audience. I think the amount of young artists should have also been taken into account with the age rating anyways. From everything I heard, she was stubborn to change despite having a sample of her audience right there. Yes, I was told that too. Previously I felt that 16+ rating was fitting for the comic, but once Volume 4 was being made, the sexual themes were much more prominent than before, and an 18+ label definitely makes more sense. but it was added way too late and Kittycorn was stubborn about it, so it doesn't even matter.
This same ZCP member was also very uncomfortable with how far the sexual talks in the group would go, and would make an effort in trying to label the comic as 18+ as soon as possible.
Hell, Volume 4 had been planned for a long time. An 18+ label should have been added long before Volume 4 even began production. Another issue I had was the increase of sexual jokes in the comic, and its AUs as well as the ZCP server itself. I made one sexual joke in that server, but outside of that, a lot of it made me personally uncomfortable. The reveal of having 4 penises being one of these moments. That dragged on for so long. I was getting so uncomfortable. I even drew my persona looking uncomfortable several times as reaction images. I stopped staying caught up on Comic Care because I was getting tired of all the sexual jokes. I also don't.
But due to expressing this discomfort, the member was allegedly heckled and brushed aside by the others. One of these members of the ZCP was Imani. Imani joined the ZCP during the creation of Sparklecare Hospital Volume 5. According to Imani, they had been a fan of Sparklecare Hospital since 2019, when they were just 16 years old.
I was a fan of Sparklecare since 2019, when I was 16, and I've had this comic as my biggest special interest since. I first started properly interacting with Kittycorn by the time the second Sparklecare was made around 2022. We didn't interact much other than the occasional time she just pops up until we probably started chatting in the summer of 2022. Kitty then started regarding me as a good friend of hers since we've gotten closer. I was not aware of her being into the stupid incest shit back then, just as a disclaimer. But we continued getting closer and she continuously told me more details about the lore of her world and characters. Then it got to the point we started talking about our lives with each other. Then it got sexual when we both decided to talk about more adult things. Again, this was before the incest shit, and I was not aware of this. My partners were aware I was friends with benefits with Kittycorn at the time, but as time went on and we got closer and closer as friends, I was suddenly DM'd by Chaos, clearly sent out by Kittycorn to relay something as he was dating her and being manipulated by her at the time. He was telling me how trauma kinks weren't black and white, and as someone who's developed trauma kinks due to my past trauma and the numerous abuse and grooming I've gone through previously, I agreed, but I clearly stated that I disapproved of acting on them or going into stupid pro-ship communities about them. Again, I have to state that Chaos was being manipulated by her at this time, and it was clearly a tactic by Kittycorn to try and sway me into supporting this dirty little secret of hers. I did admit I had a trauma kink to Chaos, and which it was presumably related to KC, which caused Kittycorn to DM me, in which she confessed her incest kink to me.
3 years later, the Sparklecare, the official Discord for Sparklecare, was made, and that was the first time Imani started interacting with the community. Imani and Kittycorn would become fast friends, and Kittycorn would tell Imani all about the lore and intricate details of the world of Sparklecare and its characters. That same summer, the relationship between the two would turn sexual, and they'd become friends with benefits. Eventually, Kittycorn's partner at the time, the aforementioned minor Chaos, would allegedly reach out to Imani, explaining what their feelings were about trauma kinks. For the people who don't know what trauma kinks are, it is essentially a catch-all term given to kinks that have arisen from sexual trauma. Returning back to Imani's testimony, they would explain how they believed Chaos was being sent by Kittycorn through manipulation to kind of soften Imani up on the topic of trauma kinks, and Imani, who had been the victim of incestual rape by their mother, admitted to having a trauma kink of their own. They speculate that Chaos brought this information to Kittycorn's attention, as Kittycorn would then, shortly after, contact Imani with trauma kinks being the main topic.
There's something I've been wanting to share with you for a while, ever since we've gotten close. I'm just a little afraid of the reception it'll have. I mean, Nick told me he thinks you're a safe person to tell, and I want to trust his judgment and also believe you wouldn't judge me either. It's extremely touchy and sensitive and hard to talk about. Sure. I'm shaking actually, wait, I don't know if I can do this. Sorry if I sound dry, by the way. You should tell me if you're comfy telling me stuff. I trust you a lot, it's just really scary. I just don't want you to think less of me. I won't. Imani, how do you feel about trauma coping mechanisms? Like, what's your perspective on it? It depends on what it is, really. They are all usually understandable. I used to be super, black and white about this stuff, but not anymore. I had a talk with Nick, and I told him I had one I knew was unhealthy, but it does help me cope though. I have one that is unhealthy, but it's the only thing that's been able to give me any space to heal in the past decade from this trauma, and I feel so much shame over it because there's people who use it for really bad reasons, and it can very easily be twisted into something it's not out of context. I totally get that. I feel shame over mine as well. I'm glad you acknowledge those types of people fucking suck though, and how it can be twisted. The brain is weird and you get attached to some stuff. Insert Tuka or Birdie clip here. The worst thing about it is I know most people out there wouldn't even try to understand because they don't know how it feels. So I'm just constantly terrified of the thought of people hating me over something that's been so helpful to me. I don't want to be lumped in with people with malicious intentions and freaks who are weird. Well, I don't really mind being exposed to it because I feel very similar in the way I kind of cope with my lore. Except the ABDL stuff, that's still a bad trigger for me. Yeah, that freaks me out too. I'm glad you don't mind it. I wanted to share it with you because you're really important to me, and I love sharing my animals with people who are important to me.
The two will go on to discuss the efficacies of sharing the concept of trauma kinks among themselves in private, and Imani would note how Kittycorn would repeatedly mention how this was only a good thing when discussed in private and not brought to anyone else's attention.
Is it a problematic kink or something like that? Because that was the thing me and Nick was talking about, like the sort of way they help people cope and that not being that bad. It's not a kink to me, that's my entire thing about it. People who treat it like one and call it hot and fetishize it are demonic and evil. Oh, it genuinely is so healing, and I hate that it's not more understood because of freaks. It's not always weird, and it makes me so mad that any association of it is seen as bad when it isn't always. Not everyone is fetishizing it. I understand your view on it though, and yeah, I get it a lot. I agree with it even. Some people have just been abused and want to heal in a safe, contained way that doesn't hurt anyone or themselves, especially if it's kept private and not shared publicly. I agree with this 100%. That's like my exact view on things. Sharing it is harmful because not everyone can heal that way, and you shouldn't encourage it in others who aren't victims, because then it becomes a fetishism and objectified, and that's so bad. Yeah, I'm glad you understand, because I hate pro-ship people so much. The people close to me that I shared this with do too. It's not the same stuff at all. Exactly. It's just, hey, we're victims and we're coping like this. I don't want to glorify or normalize it because IRL, it's a much different situation. And I don't want to desensitize myself to that, like I'm careful about it. I just wish these people aren't so insistent in prying in our private lives. It's not like we are public about this. This isn't in any of my public content. Nobody is being exposed to it except people I'm close to who consent. Am consented, yet blames me for ruining the comic for them. I hate how they keep comparing me to Chimera, who is someone I hate. Literally. M literally just hid it and never told us they aren't okay with it. Exactly, like they just went behind our backs. I just hate being labeled as a pro-shipper. I just hate people who celebrate incest as a kink publicly, unlike us. Same, we aren't pro-ships, it's a completely different thing. Also, I'm not into any of the other stuff. I hate lowly Shota, underage stuff like that stuff. I have trauma over, not just because of my mom, but the people who groomed me back then. Exactly, like, it's not the same stuff at all.
Due to this, Imani would get a feeling that it was partially their responsibility, as one of Kittycorn's closest friends, to not divulge any of this publicly. In fact, Kittycorn would not shy away from threatening suicide should the secret ever come out.
I'm in the wrong. Kitty, if you were invested in Night Stars for 8 years instead of 2 months, and it was taken over not by friends OCs but by something that triggered you, but then also you need to talk about how perfect and romantic it is every day, or the love of your life may commit suicide, you might start behaving irrationally, right? They're right. What do you mean? I told them day one my life was on the line.
Meanwhile, indulging in Kittycorn's incestuous fantasies were allegedly giving Imani nightmares and would re-trigger her trauma from her past. It didn't help that they couldn't confide in their friends as, again, they felt a certain responsibility to keep Kittycorn's kink a secret at the threat of them killing themselves. While all of this might seem to come out of left field, it becomes clearer once we take a step back and look at exactly how we got here. Kittycorn has been very upfront about the sexual abuse they suffered at the hands of their brother and the neglect of their family. According to Kittycorn, they were sexually abused by the brother when they were only 13 years old. In their vent art, they would portray themselves as the character Eve and the brother as the character Sly.
There is no part of my life that is untouched by him. Ever since it happened, I know I haven't been the same. I hear people talk about how trauma changes you forever. I saw that in myself. I saw the imperfection of what happened to me in the mirror every day in everything I did. But I didn't realize that everything that came after him was just a shadow of him. Other people might have hurt me in different ways, with different actions, but every new wound just cut into the old one, making it bigger and worse. Because it happened at such a crucial developmental stage for me, it completely altered not just me, but also my emotions, my responses to my emotions, the way I feel about others, the way I grieve. He never apologized to me or told me why he hurt me. I ask myself why all the time. Why did he hurt me? Why did I deserve it? Why did he do that to me? How can he not think about what he did to me when everything I do is because of him?
As mentioned before, prior to the Sparklecare Hospital comic, they had worked on the comic Ask Sonic the Cat, which they have also claimed to be made to placate to their older brother.
Several old animations include voice acting by that brother. He was engaged in her interests. Sonic the Cat was only made to impress him, which is why I have mixed feelings about people enjoying it. Just try to remember there was some dark shit going on behind the scenes at those ages that you will never fully know. Several weird things could have just been entirely his idea, and we wouldn't know.
It would seem like the abuse they suffered at the hands of their brother left an immeasurable deep wound in them, and they would deal with the trauma through writing stories that would often fixate on the dynamics between older brothers and younger sisters, typically ending with the two resolving their issues.
Kitty has a sort of obsession on writing older brother-younger sister dynamics, especially ones that have problems that get resolved. So we might see an out-of-place poly-sibling insert. It'll be forced and weird, but know that she has psychological problems and nobody would say no to her on something like this.
Kittycorn has never shied away from talking openly about the abuse they suffered and has multiple times stated that the comic Sparklecare Hospital has always been an allegory to sexual assault.
As soon as crit blocks became a thing, it became obvious nobody understood what the fuck this comic was meant to be from the start. My comic is literally a SA allegory. Like, I've openly said that. I'm not doing anything that I wasn't already doing with my public art. It's coping with my trauma.
According to people who would later have voice calls with Kittycorn, Kittycorn would multiple times have to mute their microphone because the brother was verbally abusing his girlfriend.
If you guys want receipts, whenever I VC'd with Kittycorn, she'd mute because her brother would be verbally abusing his girlfriend. This guy is worthless and pathetic and a shitty fucking liar.
One of Kittycorn's former partners, Wolf, would allegedly at one point call Child Protective Services in the hope of getting Kittycorn out of the house and into a more safe environment. But apparently, Kittycorn's family guilt-tripped them to come back.
After you told me about what your sibling did, my dad called CPS. You were removed from the home. We tried to get you out of living there. It did not work, but that effort was there. I don't understand how you were able to make me out to be the villain and someone horrible after that, after we tried very hard to help you. Yeah, Wolf called CPS and she cited that as one of the only good things he did for her.
While it would seem that Kittycorn's family is supportive of their artistic endeavors and are actively reading and commenting on the comic, it would however seem like they have chosen to deal with what happened between Kittycorn and their brother in a rather unproductive way.
I got chills. In any event, thanks for that wonderful, wacky, weird, swacking ride. Can't wait for V2. Thanks for sharing. Sparklecare is proof that something good can be the result of something not so good. Keep up the great, weird, funny, crazy, inspirational madness that is Sparklecare.
According to Kittycorn and Chaos, the parents either don't believe that anything happened or believe it to be of no consequence. It wasn't until almost 10 years later that Kittycorn finally went to go see a therapist because their dad didn't believe the abuse still affected them.
She had no therapist until 2024 because she finally broke down to her dad about it. Apparently he didn't think it still affected her so badly. He's a fucking creep too, to be fair. The I treat my kid like my emotional support girlfriend type of creepy dad. And he reads the comic. Comments are him. There's a few posts KC has made about him on the main Sparklecare blog. From what she writes, she seemingly does admire her father a lot, even though I feel with his neglect she really shouldn't. She does really like her dad, but I can understand why considering her mom.
This lack of support could potentially be one of the reasons why Kittycorn chose to deal with the trauma in the way that they did. The parents also constantly check up on Kittycorn, allowing them little to no privacy. And it is perhaps this need for control that has also made Kittycorn unable to move out of the house that the brother also still lives in. This brother supposedly also once read Sparklecare Hospital, and the fear of the brother finding out what the comic was talking about made Kittycorn fear for their physical well-being.
I really want to keep you safe, honestly. The inherent danger in this situation is actually physical because my family, including Blank, reads my comic and looks at the Tumblr and stuff. If it became public, he would see it and that terrifies me. Holy, I'm so sorry. You have no idea the kind of fear that was struck in my heart when he randomly was DMing me an early V4 page reaction. Holy crap. Do you think it would help if I could call? You won't have to talk, but do you think hearing a comforting voice would help? Sorry if this is a stupid idea or if I'm framing it as an excuse to hang out. This is like an actual suggestion. It's what I do with my other partners sometimes when they get really upset. Had to go find it. This was fucking terrifying.
Kittycorn has also disclosed back in 2020 to the ZCP that the brother was into fictional rape and incest art and had used that to groom them. They would go on to say that they were not okay with the excuse that it's alright as long as it is in fiction, and they believe they are a shining example of how even if it starts out as fiction, it can later go on to be acted upon, which would probably make one ponder why they would choose to depict incest and rape in their own art.
I said this to the others privately the other day, but I'll just say it here. It's personal, but frankly, I don't care if it will help anything, and honestly, I don't think it will, but meh. You know how my sibling raped me? My sibling drew rape porn and shipped/drew incest. My sibling also raped their ex-girlfriend alongside me. I think I have a right to be uncomfortable with my friend thinking this kind of stuff is okay and healthy if it's fictional. I don't care if consuming this stuff doesn't always lead to people doing bad things, but it can. I am proof it can. Please try and understand why I would feel hurt and betrayed by my friend feeling like this. I do not want to hate A, not even a little, and I still don't. I'm still sorry for my involvement, but I just wanted to explain why I feel like this.
It is safe to assume that Kittycorn's circumstances are horrible, and Kittycorn deserves pity like any other victim of these horrible circumstances do. When Kittycorn mentions that they are interested in incest as a form of coping with the abuse they suffered, it correlates well with what we know of the trauma they have been through. Apparently, since their visit with the therapist in 2024, they have taken to show the therapist some of their artwork, further adding credence to the fact that the incest in their work is one they use to cope. This being said, however, while initially used to deal with the abuse, the incest would seemingly take a life of its own and grow from a coping tool to one of obsession and something nefarious.
Feel the rhythm of the streets, neon lights and neon dreams. Bloody fists, they feel no pain when there's so much more to gain. Hunting season, if you will, tell me where'd you rather be? I can hardly see the moon. Hope we'll get there pretty soon. Trying so hard to release you out of the misery. Hold on to your wishes if you can't hold on to me. Forgive me for letting you down. Forgive me for letting you down again. I guess I'm not strong enough right now.